Time now to get the views of our media and political experts, MMA creative vice president, Democratic operative Mike Kopp, and her daily on 1510 WLAC syndicated talk show host Steve Gill. Gentlemen, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Let's talk about State Senator Jim Summerville this week. He told the Black Caucus, quote, "I don't give a rat's blank what the Black Caucus thinks." He flipped off a News 2 reporter today. Now, you can have disdain for the media. All this is fine. But as an elected official who holds a chairmanship, you cannot do what he did.
Well, we all have disdain for the media.
And that's fine. And
so let me just start by giving you a thumbs up and use the right finger as opposed to what the woman described in the story. Again, I think this guy has been kind of strange from the get-go, and I think this is just a reflection of a guy nobody knew about before he got elected. Nobody's really learned about during his time in the legislature, and sometimes under pressure and stress, you expose yourself, so to speak.
Well, I think a classic example of elected official who has no principle, who doesn't understand how to work with others. I mean, you might disagree with the Black Caucus on the issues and the merits of the issues, but that's not how you treat anyone.
He still has to hear them. They're part
Absolutely.
of the constituency.
It's part of the process. And I think the electorate expects their elected officials, maybe not always to get along on every issue, but at least to work together and work through these issues.
I do think, though, it underlines a problem we're going to have in Tennessee, and to some extent you have in Washington, where you have the African-American community that is so disconnected from being able to reach across the aisle themselves. And when you had the Democratic Party in control and the Black Caucus was a part of a majority Democratic Party, they had a big say in the issues and in what happened. They have now been marginalized as the Democrats have become a super minority in Tennessee, and they are not doing anything at all to outreach, I think even really to the broader Republican Party leadership in the House and the Senate. They are in districts that for the most part benefits them to get reelected if they are more racially divisive, and they have no connections with the white community and don't want any, frankly. So you're going to see, I think, an even more broad gap in Tennessee that shouldn't be reflected in this way, but I think it reflects a broader policy.
An issue that needs to be addressed, but you still cannot take and pick one particular constituency and say, we're just not going to pay you any attention.
Whether it's the Black Caucus or the Brown Caucus or the Yellow Caucus, it doesn't matter. You can't treat each other this way and expect to get anything done. These people have got to get along. They've got to show each other respect, and it's just not
But
the right
I
way to
think
approach
if you
it.
had a Democrat legislator say, I don't care what the Tea Party caucus thinks, and frankly, in Washington, we've heard that exact kind of language, it isn't a controversy. So why is it a controversy on one side and not on the other? People ought to be respectful of each other across the aisle, across the partisan divide, the ideological divide, and I think there's plenty of this discourse all over the map.
There's a huge difference between saying, I don't care what you think, and I don't care about the language that was used. I mean, that's just completely disrespectful.
Rats don't deserve that.
Obviously, no one can tell him to resign. That would be up to him. He has been stripped of his chairmanship. He has resigned from the Education Committee. Does Speaker Ron Ramsey need to do anything more? Does this need to go any further? Should the electorate decide in the next 2 years whether he stays or goes?
If I'm Lieutenant Governor Ramsey, this thing's been put to bed. He's been dismissed as a committee chairman. He has stepped aside. His constituents elected him, unfortunately, for another 2 years. They don't have a shot at deciding whether he stays in, whether he tries to recover, whether he tries to reach out, show some maturity or not. That remains to be seen. But at this point, it's up to his constituents, and they don't have a shot to do anything to him for 2 years.
I agree with that, except I do think the Lieutenant Governor needs to force him to sit down and try to work through some of these issues and differences. If it doesn't, he's simply just pushing it under the rug.
On the national scene, Representative Todd Akin, the legitimate rape comment. This has caused the firestorm. You need to advise these folks. They have told him,
pointing to him,
the powers of the GOP would like for him to get out. He's not going to get out. This continues to bring up the whole abortion issue, which is what the GOP does not want to be talking about right now. They want to talk about the economy. Is this one going to go away?
I think it will, and I think part of it is that you've seen such a pushback against what he said to distance themselves from him. And I think they had to do that. Part of it was timing. You literally had about 24 to 48 hours before you had to move him off to make something happen. So you had this groundswell of get out, get out, get out. He dug in his heels and refused to go. If there'd been a week or 10 days to allow it to kind of fester, to kind of gently nudge him out, it might have played differently. As it was, he decided to dig his heels in, and they're stuck with him, but they have tried to excise it like a cancer and then radiate it to make sure that his toxic language doesn't flow over to others. I think you've got other issues that are now going to come up.
And there's been no support of what he said, obviously.
Absolutely not, but I still think there's a backwash that we haven't seen yet in all campaigns where Republicans are running at all levels. I think this is going to affect every Republican on every ballot. At some point or another, they're going to have to take a position on this. And yes, a lot of them have, and the leadership has, and the top of the ticket has, but it's going to trickle down through the process, and we haven't seen the end of this
I think you need a comparison, though. This guy said something vile about rape. Bill Clinton, who sexually assaulted women, who was his conduct, his actual behavior was pretty bad towards women. He's being heralded at the Democratic convention. Why should he be speaking at the convention when he was accused of sexual assault, of that kind of behavior in the White House when they're coming on Akin? Actions speak louder than words.
You see the numbers, you know how tight this is, both of you, how tight this election is. It's really going to boil down to maybe 3 states. Could this issue be an issue that tilts it one way or the other in favor of the president against Mitt Romney? Or do you think this will eventually calm down, people will have their views, and the economy again will be the issue that decides it?
I think the economy is the issue, and it was stupid of Akin to bring it up because the economy is the issue. Every candidate running on either side of the aisle shouldn't talk about anything, frankly, but jobs, the economy for the next 60-some days or so. I think it does take a backseat to the economy because ultimately people aren't going to vote on this issue, particularly if they're not in Missouri, particularly if they're not voting in that race.
I think the latest poll stuff that I've seen shows that most people have made up their minds by now. These kind of situations just create a get out the vote kind of momentum. So I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think either side wants a lot of these issues to go away, but it's all a matter of positioning your base, doing whatever you can to mobilize your base to get out the vote. If this kind of stuff continues, of course, the women voters are going to move very quickly on
That's
this.
the next question. This is obviously a topic of interest to women voters. Mitt Romney was doing better with women voters. The president's still doing better than Mitt Romney is doing. Could this be one of those things that constituency goes one way or the other?
Well, I think it depends on how the Romney campaign addresses this over the long term. I think they have distanced themselves or tried to distance themselves from this issue, but it has raised a lot of questions about where is the Republican platform. I would suspect a lot of women voters are going to wait and see what the platform looks like coming out of the convention before a lot of final minds are made up on this.
Are you concerned about the platform?
I don't think the platform is how people cast their votes. I think they do it on appearances. I think they do it on kind of the general impressions of the two guys. And I think that you've seen the attack that, well, seniors are lost because Paul Ryan's on the ticket, and yet you look in Ohio, you look in Florida, on the Medicare issue right now, on Medicaid as well, Ryan and Romney are actually doing better among those constituent groups. So I don't think that you saw Akin as a guy that Romney tried to get elected, got involved in that primary to help him. If anything, he was probably on the other side. So there's not like there's a connection to Akin that allows it to bleed
Only
over.
about 30 seconds. The platform says no exceptions for rape regarding abortion. Even Marsha Blackburn opposes that, but she is on the committee that is setting this up. Does that bring the abortion issue to the top?
The Democrat platform supports gay marriage, and North Carolina, for example, 66% of the voters voted against it. I think gay marriage is going to be a big an issue in this campaign as abortion.
I think it is going to bring it up, and I think people are going to look more closely at the platforms going into the conventions.
Mike Kopp, Steve Gill, appreciate your time and your insight. Stay with us. This week continues in a moment.